Good afternoon, Cedarfield. We are back. It's Karen Wilder. I'm the dietitian here at Cedarfield. It's been a while since we've done a live stream, thanks to the holidays and all of the festivities and vacations, etc. But it's good to be back. I was just talking to Eddie about how we need to ramp up advertisement of my show to get people watching again, since we're kind of on the semi-lockdown again. So hopefully this will provide 30 minutes of entertainment through your week, semi-entertainment maybe. Anyway, it's good to be back. I hope you all are hunkered down during this snowy, kind of dreary day. I personally am one of the few people out there who loves winter, so I am excited to have some snow, and more excited that my drives have not been too dicey, so that we can just kind of enjoy the snow and not have to worry about being in all of that mess. Anyway, so I hope you all are enjoying the winter weather. Katrin told me that January is National Hot Tea Month, and that sparked our idea to host our tea party, which unfortunately was canceled. But hopefully we'll be able to do it again soon, because we had a lot of interest. But anyway, I bring that up because I was going to talk about tea today. It felt like a very appropriate day to talk about tea and coffee. Hopefully you're enjoying. It's a perfect day to enjoy a cup of tea out there. But then I realized I've talked about it recently on our show, so I didn't want to repeat myself too frequently, so I scrapped that idea. But I hope you all get to come to the tea party whenever we reschedule it, and you'll learn all about tea and different types of tea and the health benefits. So keep an eye out for when that gets rescheduled. So instead, I had to come up with a new topic at the last minute, and I thought, okay, well, what else is nutrition and New Year's related? And I thought, well, this is a great time to talk about diets, because it's New Year's resolution time. People, health and fitness always tends to be one of the top contenders for New Year's resolutions. And that makes sense, fresh beginning, we always want to focus on our health. So then weight loss kind of comes into that. So I don't talk about weight loss too often on this show, and there is a reason for that, and we're going to talk about it. I do talk about diets a lot, but hopefully, if you watch the show, you've heard me explain how diet can mean a weight loss plan. That's typically what we think of when we think of diets, but diets can also, in a kind of a grander scheme, talk about just your general day-to-day eating pattern, kind of like the type of diet that you follow. Maybe you follow a Mediterranean inspired diet, or you're a vegetarian diet, or maybe you live where I grew up in the South, where we eat a lot of seafood, so it's a very seafood heavy diet. Or maybe you've heard of the plant-based diet. So these aren't necessarily weight loss plans. This is just kind of the type of food you tend to eat. Maybe you're a junk food addict, and so you're more of a junk food diet kind of person. That's fine. Anyway, so we're going to shift gears, and we're going to actually talk about weight loss a little bit, because obviously as a dietitian, that's a question I get a lot. But again, I don't like to focus too much on weight loss, because a lot of diets out there just don't have a lot of sound research. They can be effective, but typically just for short term. And then once you kind of lose your weight and you reach your goal, and then you kind of go back to, your old habits, then there's a, high likely possibility that you're going to just gain the weight back. So that's why I like to kind of focus on incorporating some sort of an eating pattern that will work for you for a long period of time, rather than some sort of short-term diet plan. But I thought we would talk about some of the fad diets out there very briefly, because I kind of have a lot to say about this. So I'll just kind of give you a quick overview of some fad diets that are really popular right now. You kind of learn a little bit about them. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, like I said, about whether they're good, bad, whatever. I'll just kind of overview. I have some funny ones that we'll talk about, and then I'll give you some information about weight loss in older adults in general that I think is important for you to know. All right, so let's start with the gluten-free diet. So we actually talked about gluten not too long ago on the show, so I won't spend too much time on it, but in the last time we talked a little bit more about gluten, from a cooking and a baking perspective, and not necessarily from a health or weight loss perspective. But just to recap, so gluten is a protein that is found primarily in wheat, but also barley and rye. So these are grains that are very popular for baking bread and in pasta and things like that. So if you are someone that has celiac disease, which is an autoimmune disorder that mainly affects our GI system, then research through time has found that your body can't process gluten properly, which then causes all these GI issues. So the only way to alleviate that is to very strictly avoid gluten. So people who have celiac disease truly have to avoid gluten to avoid all of those GI symptoms that can then lead to even more serious problems. And then some people have just kind of a general gluten sensitivity, not necessarily related to celiac disease or like an intolerance. So those people can avoid gluten as much as they want to, but it's not as dire that they avoid it completely. They can kind of figure out the right balance for them. Anyway, but so as more and more became known about this gluten-free diet and how it helps people with their GI issues, particularly with celiac disease, they were finding that there was also weight loss associated with the gluten-free diet. So it kind of became this bandwagon thing where everybody was jumping on the gluten-free diet. So there's two different ways to look at it. So there are some people who, like I said, have GI issues related to gluten intake, and so they can avoid gluten to help their GI issues. But from a weight loss perspective, there is a lot of success that can be had through choosing gluten-free, but it's not necessarily the fact that you are eliminating gluten from your diet, which is causing you to lose weight. It's more related to just changing your eating patterns. Gluten is very highly associated with carbohydrates, and carbohydrates can really add up the calories really quickly. And so when you're eliminating a lot of those carbohydrates that contain gluten, then and you're probably focusing on foods like fruits and vegetables, which don't contain gluten and are also very healthy for you and low calorie, you're going to very naturally see some weight loss. So it can be a successful way to lose some weight, but it's also a very restricting diet. You're cutting out a lot of foods that you might actually enjoy. There are a lot of substitutes out there, gluten-free substitutes for wheat products, etc. And there are some that are, fine, and then there are some that are terrible. So, you're really kind of putting a limit on foods you might enjoy. And that's one of the downsides. The biggest downside to these diets is, forcing you to cut out things that you enjoy. There are very successful diets that allow you to eat whatever you want, within reason. You just have to kind of balance those indulgent foods with other foods, etc. So you kind of have to do some give and take, negotiating. If I want to enjoy this ice cream later today, then maybe I should not enjoy, that extra helping of mashed potatoes earlier in the day, whatever. So, and anyway, so with the gluten, so that's one of the downsides, is that it's restrictive, and, long term you might get really tired of these gluten-free products, or having to cut out stuff, or always having to research, what has gluten and what doesn't. So it kind of can be difficult to follow, and so long term that makes it harder to follow and keep up with. And you're more likely to kind of fall back into your old ways and then, gain back any weight that you may have lost. All right, so that's the gluten-free issue. So then kind of on the same wavelength as the gluten-free diet are all of these low-carb diets. So you've probably heard of the keto diet, the paleo diet, the low-carb diet. Even Atkins is a version of most commercial plans out there. So like these diets that you have to kind of like sign up for and like you buy their meals or whatever. These are typically based on the low carb idea. So like I was saying, the Atkins diet started off as a very low carb diet. I think they've evolved a little bit. Back in the day, there was Sugar Busters was one. My dad did that one for a long time. Other plans like Whole30. And again, a lot of these kind of commercial plans that you sign up for, these are all focused on low carbs, and a lot of them are high protein, low carb. Some are actually high fat, low carb. So again, kind of going back to the gluten-free issue, these diets can have success. But again, they're also very restricting. A lot of times you're very drastically changing the way you normally eat. But that's typically why you have success. So if you think about it in these terms, so if whatever you're doing is not working and you're gaining weight and you're continuing to gain weight, you're obviously not kind of participating in the right eating pattern. There's some excess somewhere. So if all of a sudden you're changing your diet to follow one of these plans, which is probably going to focus on cutting out a large food group that, like carbs in this instance, cutting out a large food group that does contribute calories and excessive calories if you're eating a lot of sweets and a lot of things with sugars, etc. When you're cutting those out, you're adding fruits and vegetables, which again are low carb. You're balancing it out with good healthy proteins that a lot of these are going to encourage. You're probably, if you're making an effort to lose weight, you're going to probably all of a sudden make an effort to exercise a little more, manage your stress, drink more water. All of these things are going to contribute to weight loss. So that's why a lot of times, people who go on these diets swear by them, I lost all this weight. Well, that's true. But ask them in a year or 2 years, 5 years, do you still follow this diet? Probably not, because it gets to be a pain after a while. You're doing all of this work to rearrange your eating pattern, and again, like the gluten-free, after a while you might get tired of it, or you kind of start to cheat a little bit more and more because you miss those certain foods that you really enjoyed. And then down the line, you may end up seeing that you've gained a lot of that weight back. So that's why it's kind of more important to find diet plans that are more sustainable, something that you could probably follow a little easier, 5, 10 years down the road to kind of help you keep that weight loss. A lot of times those plans take a little bit longer for the weight to come off, but long term, you're probably going to see better results. All right, so with this keto, we'll talk about that because that's so popular right now. With the keto diet, so keto is short for the word ketogenic or ketosis. So these are sciencey words. So what happens when you deprive your body of carbohydrates, which is the primary preferred source of fuel for our bodies. Our bodies were made to burn carbohydrates for fuel. That is how we were made. So when you deprive your body of those carbs and you use up all of your stores, then your body switches over to burning fat for fuel, which is fine. Like that's kind of set up that way as a kind of a backup, and logically it makes sense, right? If you're trying to lose weight, you have excess fat, you want to burn that fat. So let's get to that point where our body is burning fat. Well, the problem with that is it's not, the number one way that our body is supposed to supply itself with fuel. So it's kind of not not necessarily a last resort, but it's kind of like a plan B, and we want to try to stick with plan A. So anyway, one of the byproducts of fat breaking down in our body and burning is a molecule called a ketone. And so that's where you get this word, this keto word. So the ketogenic diet is a diet where you purposely cut out a lot of carbs to force your body to burn fat to create these ketones. So this is something that was found years ago to be beneficial to people, particularly children, who have very hard to control seizures, usually related to epilepsy. So this became a diet that children were being put on to control seizures, and they found that it was successful, but they were doing it under the, kind of the watchful eye of doctors and dietitians to make sure they were getting all of the nutrients they needed, without all of those carbs. So obviously these, patients were having a hard time gaining weight. That's why they had to, make sure they were doing it, under supervision. So then that kind of, later on, people started to kind of catch on to this eating plan, like, oh, okay, it's, it's really created for these children with epilepsy, but it's also a good way to lose weight. So let's, I'm going to try to incorporate this into my life. So this notion of entering into ketosis, which is when you reach a certain level of these ketones in your bloodstream. So this is kind of the ultimate goal for these people who are trying to control their seizures. But it's also become this ultimate goal for people trying to lose weight. So it's not necessarily the healthiest place for us to be, and it can actually be somewhat harmful for our bodies to remain in ketosis for too long. That's kind of like a state of starvation, and like your body is translating that as a state of starvation. So for these children, it sounds very extreme, but it's going to help them ultimately with their seizures. But for people who don't have these neurological disorders, it's not necessarily a healthy state for us to exist in. It's also very difficult to reach that state. So for kind of people who are on these keto diets and they're talking about reaching ketosis, they probably aren't. Not to say that they aren't educated or understand the diet, but again, it's kind of a difficult state to be in and to reach. So just for your reference, for the true keto diet, so normally, a normal person who doesn't necessarily have to control their carbs, with diabetics or anything, they have to kind of limit or control their carbs. But for normal people, in normal health, typically they're consuming about 200 to 250 grams of carb a day. That's kind of a normal healthy range to aim for. People who are on this keto diet are only eating 20 to 25 grams of carbs a day. That is it's so hard to fathom. And then like for perspective, a glass or like a slice of bread is probably about 15 grams of carbs. So when you think about, they're probably not even eating the equivalent of like 2 slices of bread in carbohydrates. So that's how restricting that diet is. So people out there who are saying they're following the keto diet, they're probably following a modified version of it. Obviously, hopefully, they're probably just following a very general low carb diet. All right, so again, kind of going back to when you're changing your eating plans, you may find some success. Following a low carb diet can be a good way to lose weight, but it may not be as sustainable in the long run. It could be a good way to control your diabetes and your blood sugar if that's something that you are concerned about. It might help to improve your insulin sensitivity, etc. The other thing that I really don't like about the keto diet or these low carb diets are people who consider fruit to be a cheat food. because fruit is very high in natural sugars, which are carbohydrates, so people have a tendency to cut out fruit. And I would never recommend anyone cut out fruit because there are so many other good things that you're getting from fruit, like water and fiber and lots of vitamins and minerals and antioxidants. So I would never recommend anyone cut out fruit. So there's also the paleo diet, which is another version of low carb, but very high protein and high fat. This kind of goes back to that notion that we should eat what our ancient ancestors ate, the hunters and gatherers who were going out and eating animals that they were hunting, and not really eating a lot of this processed food. So that we have now because of modern technology, which I can agree with. Cutting out some of those processed foods can be very healthy, but that doesn't necessarily mean we need to cut out dairy and grains and fruits and vegetables. Those have shown to have a lot of really good health benefits, especially when we eat them, more naturally, less processed and whole. All right, so let's talk about some of the funnier diets. I say funny might not be the right word because some of these can be downright harmful, but there are people out there, they exist, and they exist because someone follows them. But they are kind of ridiculous. Maybe that's the right word. So there is the werewolf diet. This is also kind of, I guess they call it like the moon or the cycle diet. I don't know. Anyway, this is a diet where you follow the cycles of the moon, the phases of the moon to determine what you should eat. And you fast during the full moon and the new moon, and then based on the phases in between, there's like certain things that you should eat. I don't know. I don't know what the research is to back that up. There's also foods or diets where adults are going to the store and buying baby food, and they're just eating straight baby food, which I guess it has some merit because you're eating, food that's not as processed with all of the preservatives and things in it, but you're also missing out on a lot of good fiber and just chewing, and I don't know what the benefits of that is versus just eating normal food. There is all this, I had never heard of this one. I looked it up on the internet today and I just couldn't believe it. There is the cotton ball diet. So there are people who will soak cotton balls in fruit juice and eat those as a way to kind of fill up their stomach so that they don't eat as much when they sit down to eat their normal meal. That just blew my mind. I do not recommend, no one would ever recommend that. Some people say, oh, well, cotton is a natural fiber, blah, blah, blah. But if you were to eat actual cotton balls that are, created in a factory, they have chemicals and everything on them. And plus it can plug up your digestive tract. So don't do the cotton ball diet. There are people who will willingly eat a tapeworm so that they can reap the benefits of having a parasite in them. It's just unbelievable. And then this is another one I had never heard of, the Sleeping Beauty diet. So this is a diet where people are encouraged to take sedatives or sleeping pills to sleep more, because when you're sleeping, you're not eating. So then you're not eating more throughout the day. Ridiculous. People will do anything to lose weight. And I guarantee you, all those people probably end up with some sort of emotional eating disorder, or they probably just gained the weight right back. So I don't recommend those. Let's incorporate some healthy eating patterns into our lives. All right, let me look. Okay, got a little time. So let me talk about, I skipped the intermittent fasting. That's another kind of buzzword right now out there with dieting. So this is a plan where you choose certain times during the day or certain days during the week where you drastically reduce your calorie intake or don't eat food at all. So some people will pick a certain time of the day, a range, maybe 10 o'clock to 6 o'clock where they eat, and then the other hours of the day they don't eat anything. Some people will maybe eat their normal eating patterns 5 days a week and then pick 2 days a week where they fast and drastically reduce their calories. There has been some research to show some health benefits to intermittent fasting. And obviously you're going to lose weight because you're probably going to eat less throughout the day. My problem with that is I would be starving for so long. And again, it kind of goes back to restricting yourself from things that you enjoy. It's not necessary to restrict yourself so much and make yourself miserable. Just eat some food and show a little self-control. So intermittent fasting, can have some benefits if you're just trying to be more mindful about the foods you're eating. If you're trying to maybe pay attention to some of your times when you do have trouble controlling what you're eating, those late night snacking periods or whatever. So there can be some emotional benefits to intermittent fasting, but again, it's very restricting a lot of times. And I don't know, for me personally, I don't see the benefit of making yourself miserable by starving for so many hours during the day. It can really affect your mental focus. If you're someone like me who has to come to work, it would be really difficult for me to focus on my work, if I haven't had breakfast in the morning or something. So anyway, it's something that, you might consider. There could be some benefits, but it could also, really affect your day-to-day routine or kind of your, your emotional health and your, whatever. So anyway, so one final thing I wanted to say about weight loss is that there is an actual protective measure for maintaining a healthy weight for older adults. So there are typically healthy ranges of weight that your doctor has probably always been striving for you to stay within. But as we get older, that range kind of shifts up. So if you were someone who has been focused on weight loss for a long time, which is normal, society kind of shoves that down our throat that we should weigh a certain amount. We've been told about all of the risk that obesity causes for diabetes and heart disease and et cetera, et cetera. So, but as we get older, and when I say older, I'm talking about 65 and older, but more so for kind of that middle older range, which is, more like 75 to 80 and then on, that kind of shifts. So as a dietitian, especially in healthcare, when I work with a lot of those residents who are a lot older, I am tending to look at a healthy weight being much higher than we would normally think of. So there is a lot of research that's showing that there is this protective factor for being what a normal range would be considered overweight, but as you get older, that range goes up. So someone who might be considered overweight would actually be considered a healthy weight. Hopefully I explained that well. So here's an example. So I am 5'5". So for my height, the healthy weight range is 110 to 150. So if I fall in somewhere there, my doctor would be like, great, you're doing a good job. You're at a healthy weight. But for someone over 65, the research shows that shifts. So if you were 5'5" and you are over 65, that healthy range shifts from 110 to 150 to 140 to 180. So that gives you, a much higher weight range to fall into to be considered healthy. So that's something to consider. And if you have some questions about that and kind of what your personal healthy weight range should be based on your age and your height, I'd be happy to help you figure that out. So again, I think overall the emphasis for weight should not be on weight loss, especially as we get older, which would be most people here at Cedarfield. I think it's more important to focus on just general health, a healthy eating pattern, getting exercise, getting good sleep, managing your stress, staying hydrated. I think if you can do all of that, Within reason, you're going to probably very naturally fall into a healthy weight range. Or at least you'll be doing the best that you can for your body. And I think that's the most important thing, rather than focusing so much on that number on the scale. Again, because as we get older, that weight is going to provide a little bit of protection for you. It's going to protect your muscle mass. It's going to help you maintain your independence, etc. So anyway, if you have any questions about whether or not you are at a healthy weight range, weight loss, weight gain, etc., I'm always happy to help you figure out what your personal needs are. So feel free to contact me. So we are hopefully going to be back on a regular schedule. So we'll be, most Wednesdays. We'll probably skip the Residents Council week. So we look forward to you tuning in. We are also recording these now, and you can find them on the My Cedar Field app. So if you miss a show, you can catch it there. Tell your friends. I'm going to hopefully start advertising a little more. It's great to be back, and I hope you all have a very, very happy New Year. Bye.